All right, so today's lesson is on an introduction to body systems that many of you have probably had a little bit before. Ultimately, we're going to start by talking today about homeostasis, and then after we're done with that, going more in depth into each of the body systems as we talk about the overview. So homeostasis is the way your body maintains stable internal conditions. When stable internal conditions are not met, that is what we call disease when it breaks down. So it can be related to kind of being like a thermostat in your home. You start with the thermostat set at a particular point. When the temperature drops below that point and the sensor detects that, then it flips your heating system on, which sends a signal via a wire to start warming up. And then heat is produced by the system, and that is the response, which is good. However, if it continued to heat up and got hotter and hotter, then the room would eventually become uncomfortable. So it will, when it reaches the set point, turn the system off. That's not super unlike the way your own body system works. When you are out on a very hot day, sitting in the sun, it gets really toasty warm, which sounds really good right now, then your body temperature begins to increase. When your body temperature increases to a certain point, that will be detected by heat receptors inside your skin that will send a message in the form of feedback to your brain. Your brain goes, oh boy, she's getting too hot, so we need to do something to cool the body down. So in that case, there are effectors in the body that will tell the body, okay, sweat glands, start releasing some water, because evaporation is a cooling system and it will cause the body temperature to decrease. The reason this is called negative feedback is because the response is opposite the signal. So the signal was the sun, the body was getting hot, the response was to cool it down. Same thing happens when you're looking at a cold situation and you're up in the snow. Your body system decreases. There's receptors in the skin that send messages to the brain. Oh, it's too cold. We need to do something to remedy that situation. So the muscles will shiver, and the shivering causes the body temperature to increase. Again, the response is opposite the stimulus. When the response is opposite to the disturbance or the stimulus, it fixes the problem. It kind of sounds counterintuitive, because oftentimes we would think of the word of negative as being a bad thing, but in this case it just means that the response is opposite. So what would a positive feedback situation be? Let's say that you had a cut on your skin and you started to bleed out, and your body detected that there was a decrease in blood pressure. As a response, it's going to try to increase the blood pressure, but as it does that, it pumps more blood out, and so then the blood pressure starts to decrease even more. So in that case, the response isn't opposite. It causes the blood pressure to drop even farther, and so it's telling you that there's something wrong with the body. So when homeostasis is not in balance, that's often what we call disease. For example, your body temperature is usually 98.6 degrees Celsius. That's normal body temperature. But what happens when you have an infection? Well, your body starts to heat up and it can get a fever, and that's an indication that the body is diseased. So when homeostasis isn't working, when something is out of balance, that is what we call disease. So when we look at the organization and put this whole thing into perspective of what we've been and where we've been, the most basic unit of organization is the atom, and we've talked about the four most common, the CHON, the carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and sometimes phosphorus and sometimes sulfur, and other ones are the basic units of matter of life. And when you take atoms and you put them together, that's when you get a molecule, such as water, carbon dioxide. You take a bunch of atoms and you make a really large molecule. That's called a macromolecule, but still called a molecule. And those are ones where we've looked at like proteins and carbohydrates and fats and nucleic acids like DNA. And then when you put a whole bunch of those macromolecules together and they start functioning, then you get a cell, which is the basic unit of life. And then when you put a bunch of cells together that are functioning for a common purpose, that is called a tissue, a group of related cells like a heart tissue. And then if you have a group of tissues that work together, that is called an organ. And organs could be things like your heart, your liver, your lungs. And then when you have a bunch of organs that work together, that's called an organ system, such as the circulatory system or the respiratory system, until you get all of them working together, and that is called an organism. So as a way of helping you remember that, we'll go on and do some drawings. Okay, so you can see I've drawn first just an example of an atom, and I picked for the atom to be hydrogen, and then put a couple of other atoms with that to make up a water molecule. And then if you wanted a really big molecule, an easy one for me to draw was the macromolecule of DNA. If you get a bunch of molecules working together, that is going to form an organelle. And see if you can guess which organelle I tried to draw there, pulling back from those recesses of your brain about cells and cell organelles. That one is also known as the powerhouse of the cell. Did you get it? That is my version of the organelle, a mitochondria. When the organelles start to work together, that's when you get a cell. And I specifically picked a particular cell from the body that is from the lining of the intestines. It has little hair-looking projections on the top. Those are used for absorbing nutrients. And notice how the nucleus is towards the bottom of the cell. That's to keep it away from the acid that is also part of the small intestines to protect that. When we have a bunch of cells working together, then you get yep, you got it, it's a tissue. When you have a bunch of tissues that work together, then that is what's going to make up a organ. And I picked a really easy organ to draw, and that's representing a kidney. And then finally, when you have a bunch of organs that work together to fulfill a function, like the kidneys and the ureter and the bladder, that is what makes up an organ system. And so the kidneys, ureters, bladder together are known, and the urethra are known as the excretory system. And then when you get all of those systems together into one body, that's what's going to be recognized as a organism. So of course, pause this so that you can get your drawings done at your own pace, and then move on to a little check your understanding quiz and see if you can get the following questions correct. I'll pause, let you try these, and of course you can pause the tape as well. And then here are the answers, so you can check to see if you understood today's lesson. All right, our next one, we'll be talking about an overview of what each of the different body systems do.